Good morning, everybody. Thank you for the introduction. It's an honor to be among you this morning. Today, I'm going to present the influence of climate change in Canada, specifically in north of Canada and around North Bay, actually, in Nipissing area, where some of you are present currently. Can I share my screen to show the presentation?
Yes, it's just in your bottom, the
Okay.
bottom of your screen. You click
All
the
right.
share button.
Okay. Is it shared?
Yep.
If I
Go to view.
change my slide, just to make sure you see my slides, if I go up and down. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
We see it.
Perfect. Well, I would like to start with general conception of climate change to see when it happened, how it happened. And I like to share with you points of view of scientists all around the world. So climate change is any change in the state of climate, which might be short-term or long-term, which might be as a result of human activities, or could be even totally natural, as it happened before during the Ice Age. That was one totally natural. But this one that we are experiencing right now might be human-induced. So, for example, in 1950, the population was 3 billion, and nowadays, almost 7 billion people are living around the world. And this population that has been raised twofold needs energy, needs food, needs transportation, and all this has caused greenhouse gas emission to be 60% more than what it used to be. Greenhouse gas are a variety of emissions, including carbon dioxide, methane, and a bunch of others. And among them, carbon dioxide is thought to be the most critical one, as it lasts along more than the others. So since 50s, scientists knew that climate is changing and warned about it. But this warning, I'm not going to blame anybody, but this warning was not taken seriously until recently. And as you see here, Mr. Edward Teller in 1959 was presenting the influence of greenhouse gas emissions and warned this global warming. Nowadays, almost 100% of independent scientists believe that this climate change, this climate crisis is human-induced. And perhaps that's why this needs to be corrected by us that made it. And I feel proud to share with you that Canada is one of pioneers in producing climate change data and in taking climate change seriously. You see here that in 1995, 3 decades ago, Canada was a pioneer of producing regional climate change data. Regional climate change databases are actually climate databases that project climate from, let's say, 1950 up to 2100. And this shouldn't be mixed up with the weather data that predict state of weather, let's say, up to next week or for 2 weeks or a month. Climate data are kind of general, and they may not necessarily match exactly with observation, but they show what is the trend of climate. And as I mentioned earlier, Canada was one of pioneers in predicting climate change trend in decades to come. And perhaps the reason for that was the fact that Canada is more vulnerable to climate change. As a country, which is close to pole, North Pole, and in general, countries with higher latitudes, northern countries, are more susceptible to the influences of climate change. Is my screen still shared? Okay, yeah. So I would like to now focus more on local influences of climate change. And I just said that Canada is more susceptible to climate change. Now you see that the average temperature in past 5-6 decades globally has raised around 1 degree. In Canada, it is almost twofold. It's 1.5. And in north of Canada, it's even worse. It's more than 2. It's 2.2 degrees Celsius. And as you see in this map here, it's obvious that in north of Canada, the influence of climate change and actually global warming is more pronounced, and it will be more intense rather than south of Canada. So let's go see what's happening here in North Bay, or there, because I'm in Toronto today. So in left panel, you see the trend of temperature in the past 3 decades, and you see that an increasing trend is quite obvious. It's evident that we are going to have warmer climate in the future if this trend continues, which will be. And the same goes for snowfall trend. You see that in North Bay, the data has been taken from North Bay Airport. You see that snowfall is following an increasing trend, annual snowfall. I would like to share with you what happens if the temperature rises a little bit. This is not exactly what is happening in North Bay. This is for demonstration purposes, but it shows what happens in North Bay or elsewhere in Canada, because it's a general trend of temperature. So the blue graph is actually kind of temperature in annual basis. You see that very warm temperature, like 30 degrees Celsius, or very low temperature, minus 30 degrees Celsius, they do have less chance of occurrence in a year. And mostly we are going to have temperatures around 4, 5, 6 degrees, which do have chance of occurrence of plus 20%. So here, for example, 25 degrees Celsius in current climate has 10% chance of occurrence, which is kind of, I guess, normal. It can be easily approved with common sense that in a year, maybe 10% of days, you feel 25 degrees Celsius. But let's say that the temperature average goes from 4 degrees Celsius to 6 degrees Celsius. It means that that graph will be shifted toward the right, as you see here. And in that case, the temperature that has 10% chance of occurrence is going to be 30 degrees Celsius rather than 25. So it means that extreme temperature is going to be more intense and is going to be more frequent in future. With that introduction, I'd like to share some insights about heat wave in Canada, which has been much more frequent in past few years. First of all, climate change influence is very local. It will be sensed differently, even in Canada as a whole country. It will be sensed differently in Mississauga rather than North Bay. So in Mississauga, heat wave is defined as 3 days or more with plus 32 degrees Celsius. And remember that average temperature in Mississauga is 8.2. Here in North Bay, 2 days plus 29 is going to be a heat wave. And it's because people in North Bay are less familiar with those temperatures in Mississauga. So you see that heat wave in North Bay receives more attention rather than Mississauga, because it can happen with temperatures inferior to what we see in Toronto in Mississauga. And again, here I brought some information from North Bay Airport. This shows you the trend of potential heat wave in North Bay in recent years. And you see that after, let's say, 1999 or 2000, the trend is much more intense. We have felt much more heat wave in North Bay, and this trend increases in the future. And the only key to be ready for that is to raise awareness. For example, to extend shopping mall hours so that people can go there as a cooling station. Water distribution centers or aqua parks needs to be more publicized, and flexible working hours, especially for those who work outdoor, should be adopted as mitigative measures. Well, I don't like to cast only dark side of climate change. There might be some silver lining there. For example, some farming activities, for them, maybe climate change is positive because growing season extends. So maybe 2 cycles would be possible for some seeds in north of Ontario with this extended growing season. But we should remember that it's not always positive influences, because on the other hand, with warmer temperatures that we just talked about, we are going to have a dry soil in north of Ontario. Here in this table, I'm showing you soil moisture, which is rain or snow minus evaporation. And as you see in June, July, and August, we have negative moisture, which means that evaporation is more than rainfall received by the soil. And this will be even worse in the future. You see that, for example, in June, from minus 29.3, we are going to have minus 35.8. So this aspect might be kind of a sad news for farming activities, despite the fact that growing season extends. Well, in terms of energy consumption, considering the fact that we are going to have warmer temperature in the future and with more frequent heat wave, it's quite understandable that we are going to need more energy to cool down our dwelling in north of Ontario. And on the other hand, we are going to need less energy to warm up our dwelling in the future. So heat degree is defined as a temperature. Cold heat degree is defined as the temperature minus 18, which needs to be warmed up. And on the other hand, heat cooling degree we just talked about, and warming degree is any temperature plus 18 that needs to be cooled down. And as you see, it follows a decreasing trend in the future for cooling degree, and follows an increasing for heating degree. So climate change is going to be costly everywhere, especially in Canada and especially in north of Canada. This trend that I showed you also earlier in one of my slides is actually annual snowfall in North Bay. And as you see, it increases. More snowfall means more snow plowing, and it means more fuel needed for snowplow machines and trucks. What we did here was identifying the fuel that is needed to clear roads in Bonfield. I was director of planning in Bonfield until recently. So here is a model that shows you how much fuel is needed to clear Bonfield roads when it snows. So in 2008, for example, for snowfalls less than 4 centimeter, we had 20 occurrences and 345 liter of fuel was needed. For snowfalls between 4 and 7, 575 liter was needed. And for snowfalls more than 70 centimeters, 1179 liter of fuel was needed to clear the roads. And we developed a model for that. The actual value, as you see, was compared with predicted value to see if our model is valid or not. And the results are quite satisfactory. So we did that for more than 10 years to see if this model is valid and if this can be used for future. And after examining that, we followed this trend of a snowfall that you see here toward future. And we realized that, for example, in 2030, if we follow this snowfall trend, we are going to need much more fuel than today. And with the price of fuel that we are all aware of, it is going to cost a lot more for example, Bonfield as a municipality to clear snow in the future. So perhaps a financial planning would be needed for Department of Public Works in Bonfield and also elsewhere in North of Ontario to be ready for cost of climate change in future. But before again going to negative sides of climate change, I would like to share some positive sides, which is a little bit off topic here, but still I would like to share it. When it snows more, it's not all bad. For some business, it's quite great actually. For example, snowmobilers, they love snowfall and it's quite understandable. I don't blame them. For a ski hill in North Bay, when it snows more, it is going to have some positive influence. People would go there frequently. They can go there in an extended period, and snow hill managers, they have less difficulty to provide a snow and create artificial snow. Less water will be consumed for that, as much as we have natural snow there. Hotel and Airbnb business is going to be thrived with more snowfall in north of Ontario. For example, in Bonfield, if snowmobilers that are driving to north from south of Ontario, if they see that they have the snow they require in Bonfield, perhaps they don't go far north because they will be satisfied with what, let's say, Bonfield or North Bay Trail can provide to them. Outdoor skatering will be more welcoming to people that are joining sport activities. So it's always a trade-off between positive and negative influences of climate change in north of Ontario. We talked about cost of climate change when it comes to snowfall. I'd like to share some other potential cost of climate change related to municipalities when it comes to warmer temperature. So the design criteria for pavement in North Bay is 58 degrees Celsius. That is the maximum that asphalt can tolerate, maximum temperature that asphalt can tolerate in North Bay. And this is actually a 20-year maximum. So, which was kind of validated between our model here and guidelines. With warmer temperature trend that I shared with you, it is expected that this temperature can be projected to 64. So it is expected that possibly pavement in, let's say, 20 years or 30 years in Nipissing region, they might be susceptible to deterioration faster than expected. In order to avoid that, higher quality material should be used in asphalt, possibly, and that is causing an extra cost of 7,000 per kilometer, which is not really significant compared to total cost of asphalt material. But this with what I'm going to say is, with this added cost, we can avoid premature deterioration of pavement in the future. Another cost of climate change for us is algal bloom, which is a problem in most of lakes in north of Ontario, also in south. It's a recent problem. Previously, these incidents were not as frequent as they are today. And one reason could be warmer temperature, some farming activities, some septic tank leakage. There could be a variety of reasons, but it has been confirmed that there might be some connections between algal bloom and lake water temperature. So thanks to the data that I had from North Bay Manitoba Conservation Authority for Trout Lake, I connected air temperature in the area with lake temperature with the formulation that you see. And different scientific sources believe that the critical temperature for algal bloom is perhaps between 20 and 30 degrees Celsius. And as I mentioned earlier, there might be some other factors in algal bloom, but I like to focus here only on water temperature, which is directly connected to climate change. As you see here, in the future, we are going to have much more frequent sequences of temperature that are between 20 and 30 degrees Celsius. That leads to algal bloom compared to today. It's almost 30% more chance of having algal bloom in the future compared to today. And eventually, I like to talk about flooding events in north of Ontario. Flooding events is not a problem in north of Ontario. It's a problem all over Canada, especially in Ontario and especially perhaps in north of Ontario. We see that for this green box you see is chance of occurrence of one-day rainfall with 100-year return period. You see that it is going to be 20% more in the future. In the other table, you see that maximum 3-day temperature, which could result in flooding events, both a danger for residential sector and also in farming activities, is going to be 8% more frequent in the future. And it certainly influences flooding events. You see here that, well, this is a comparison of hydrograph, river behavior in current climate compared to future climate in Wasi River, which is 10 minutes from North Bay. You see that we are going to have more water, volume of water in this river will be more, even though perhaps the peak flood reduces. And this is kind of expected for most of Canadian rivers, as you see in the left panel, which is a general river behavior developed by Environment Canada. And the reason for a smaller peak value, but more total water volume is because we are going to have less total snow depth by the end of spring. It's because we are going to have warmer winter in the future, and it means that we are going to have more frequent midwinter thaw events, and it causes kind of less snow depth at the end of winter. So less peak is expected, but on the other hand, considering the fact that we are going to have more total snowfall in general, we are going to have more water in most of Canadian rivers. Well, I just don't want to share climate change trend with you. It's perhaps more meaningful to share some possibility of curbing climate change, of controlling negative influences of climate change with different either policies or individual activities in Canada. Electric vehicles and incentives that the government is providing could be key. I know that there are some challenges of having an electric vehicle in north of Ontario, considering the fact that most of cities are apart from each other in north of Ontario compared to south. And also those winters in north of Ontario, I have been there several years. I know that battery might not be the best solution there, but still, and also some less frequent charging station in north of Ontario. Yes, there are many challenges of infrastructure yet in north of Ontario, but still maybe hybrid vehicles or electric vehicles in the future could be key in north of Ontario. Sustainable development, which is strongly supported by municipalities and conservation authorities in Ontario, could be another solution. Energy-wise renovations that is backed up by many loans provided by financial institutions could be a good individual activity to curb climate change, and eventually wetland restoration, which is governed by conservation authorities, could be another solution to climate change. And I'd like to wrap up my presentation with some concluding remarks. Well, not surprisingly, this is the evident, this is the obvious conclusion of my presentation. Future is not going to be what it used to be. Canada is experiencing climate change more than other countries, and north of Canada will be warmer and wetter compared to many other regions, and extreme values of temperature and precipitation will be more frequent and more intense in north of Canada. Climate change is going to be costly to all of us. There are some silver lining, there are positive influences, like I said, for farming activities, for tourism, but on the other hand, there are some damages that can be done on our either natural or built asset. And finally, climate crisis can be controlled by community engagement, hand in hand with governmental agencies. Thank you very much. It was an honor and a pleasure to be among you this morning. If you have any questions, I will be happy to answer.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rouhani. So before we sign off, does anyone have any questions? Okay, Harriet, of course.
Thank you very much, Hassan, for your presentation. It's a very stark reality, some of the figures you've given us. I have a couple of questions, I think.
Sure.
One of them is, you know, we have a theme here in our city right now, Grow Our City, and that means more development. And I'm wondering, you know, do you have any ideas about sustainable development that you can share with us? Because it seems that growing our city, it seems to me that when homes are built, that the whole area where the homes are being built are being scarified. The land is, and the trees, everything comes down. So any thoughts on that?
Well, sustainable development is any kind of activity that supports people, financial resources, and natural assets. So this is actually a triangle of sustainable development. No damage to people, no damage to financial resources, no damage to nature. Yes, urban development could have some negative influences on nature. But on the other hand, if it is controlled and if it is in a smart manner, that can kind of prevent damage to nature. If urban development is backed up by kind of restoration and by kind of reducing footprint and trying to avoid damaging the nature as less as possible, or if possible, for any tree that has been cut, let's plant another one. That could be a good resource, or by creating bioswales, or creating roof gardens or rain gardens. They all can support sustainable development or avoid construction where floodplain is present, because it's not kind of sustainable to use lots of material like concrete and asphalt, where it could be washed, let's say, in a year or two. That's against sustainable goals. There are many other activities in sustainable development, like reducing water consumption in dwellings by using rain garden, or using usable wastewater, not all portion of wastewater, for gardening activities or for flush. These can support damaging natural resources, including water and land, as much as possible. But that depends on the region. Sustainable activities cannot be prescribed equally for all regions. It needs to be researched to see what is the most viable sustainable development solutions depending on the region.
I'm thinking about north. I was in the Northwest Territories, and their big concern is the permafrost, the melting of I guess it's the permafrost, and how that's going to impact their homes and things. So is that a...
Oh yeah, that certainly is damaging to residential sector. That can cause flooding, that can cause landslide, and it really deteriorates nature up there. And one of the reasons that scientists believe that Canada, and especially north of Canada, is more vulnerable to climate change negative influences is what you mentioned, deterioration of north of Canada, the nature there. Yeah, and well, the only key to that is curbing climate change and adopting mitigative measures to avoid potential negative influence of climate change.
Thank you very much. So any other questions? Great. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Rouhani.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure, and look forward to summits like this more and more.
Definitely.
Have a good rest of the day.